We envision an ATE community in which evaluation is valued, systematic, and used to improve the education of technicians in high-tech fields. We do that through engaging the ATE community with information, expertise, and tools to advance high-quality evaluation. All right, the materials. So we will have slides available for you, a resource booklet, which you should have already received, I believe. You can click the link on the right-hand side of your screen if you want to download them now. They're also available on our website, and super conveniently, in a couple of days, you'll get an email from me that's going to have a link to the recording, the resource booklet, and the slides. So, we'll make sure that you're covered one way or another. I'm Samantha Hooker. I'm part of the Evaluate team, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. Our presenters are Brianna Hook Singletary, a Senior Research Associate with Evaluate, and Lissa Wilson-Betcho, Evaluate's Principal Investigator. We want to thank other members of our Evaluate team, Maureen Green, again, our chat hero, Lori and Williams Noren. If you're not familiar with Evaluate, we are located at the Evaluation Center at Western Michigan University. We want to thank our colleagues at Mentor Connect, Pam Silvers, Emery DeWitt, and Elaine Kraft. And we also want to thank Lewis McIntyre and Daphne Lewis. They were able to give us a lot of great input and feedback to bring this webinar to you today. All right. And lastly from me, although we are funded by the National Science Foundation, the views in today's webinar are Evaluate, so they may not necessarily reflect the views of the National Science Foundation. And now I will hand it over to Brianna.
Thank you, Samantha. I'm really happy to be here today with Lissa to talk about the NSF ATE evaluation from concepts to proposal plans. I'm going to go ahead and turn off our cameras so that you can focus on the slides, and we'll turn the cameras back on during the question and answer breaks. We have a lot to cover today, but before we jump in to the nuts and bolts of our proposal plans, I want to acknowledge that evaluation often comes with assumptions, strong opinions, and sometimes even a bit of hesitation. That is real. And as we move through today's webinar, we invite you to reflect on how you are thinking about evaluation and what it means within the context of your ATE work. In the ATE solicitation, there is a section on evaluation. It clearly states that all ATE-funded projects must include an evaluation. If this is your first time applying for NSF funding, you might not be fully sure what that means in practice. You may already have a strong project idea and be working with colleagues to outline activities and build your work plan, but feel unsure about where to begin with the evaluation. In this webinar, we will start by grounding ourselves in a few core evaluation concepts, such as what is evaluation, why is evaluation important, who can evaluate, where do you find evaluators, and how much does evaluation cost? Then we'll move into the key components of an evaluation plan for your ATE proposal. We'll walk through the role of the evaluator, developing strong evaluation questions, identifying meaningful data, planning for communication and use, and mapping out a realistic timeline. The goal is for you to leave with a clearer understanding of what NSF is looking for and how to turn these concepts into a strong, practical evaluation plan that truly fits your project. We are going to start today with some core evaluation concepts to ground our conversation. So let's begin with the most fundamental question. What is evaluation? At its core, evaluation is a process of learning, of seeking understanding, of making informed decisions, and of ensuring that efforts are truly making a difference. When we evaluate programs, we're asking important questions like, did this project achieve its goals? Why or why not? Who benefited? And just as importantly, who didn't? Were the impacts fair for all of those involved? And what should change moving forward? The learning from an evaluation should be driven by you, the project staff, and those served by the project. This might be sorry. This might be students, faculty, or business and industry partners. It can be really helpful to ask these groups what they want to know about their projects, what questions matter to them, what insights would be most useful. We'll come back to this, but at the end of the day, the best evaluations are a partnership between the project team and the evaluation team. Your evaluators are your partners in learning. They're not here to catch you doing something wrong or to break down your work. They're not auditors, and this isn't a performance review. Improvement data isn't a reflection of the worth of staff or project. It's just information that can be used to identify opportunities for growth. Evaluators are there to work with you, to make your project better for the sake of your project and ultimately your students. There's no such thing as a failed project. Just like in any scientific experiment, there's no bad data, only opportunities to learn. Every piece of information, even when things don't go as planned, is a chance to reflect, adjust, and improve. When a project falls short of its goals, it's not failure, it's insight. Understanding what doesn't work gets you closer to what does. All right, so what does this actually look like in practice? Boiled down, evaluation involves 4 main steps. First, asking important questions about a project's processes and outcomes. This is about making sure the evaluation focuses on things that really matter. This is where your project's learning desires come in. These questions scope the rest of the evaluation. The next step is gathering evidence that will help answer those questions. Evidence for evaluation is often gathered using research methods like focus groups, interviews, surveys, or observations. In ATE programs, evaluations also often use a college's institutional data, may use results from course evaluations, and sometimes include feedback from panels of experts or advisors. Then we have to make sense of the data. So we interpret the results and answer the evaluation questions. When it comes to interpreting or making meaning of the data that was collected, evaluations are almost always look for project strengths and weaknesses. When measuring outcomes, it's important to understand their impact and what they mean for those involved. This is often done by comparing to some sort of benchmark or standard. And then the last step is to use the information gathered for project improvement, accountability, and planning. The use of evaluation findings for decision-making is a key part of the evaluation cycle. But this isn't really a final step because the evaluation should help shape decisions for the next project. And then this cycle of learning starts all over again. So, why should you evaluate your project? Why should you want to evaluate your project? And as I said before, evaluation is all about learning. And don't we all love learning? We typically talk about 3 main benefits that come from evaluations. First, learning about what works and what doesn't work in order to improve your project. Second, sharing those learnings back with NSF. As your funder, NSF also wants to learn what changes have happened because of their investment in your project. And third, providing evidence of the effectiveness of your project, both for your project and for others who are trying to do similar things. Evidence of what works can add to the larger field of technician training. A saying we often hear is that the most important purpose of evaluation is not to prove, but to improve. While research is usually done to build knowledge, evaluation is meant to support decision-making. The first purpose of evaluation is for improvement and decision-making. Utility, or the usefulness of an evaluation, is actually a standard of quality which evaluations are judged. Evaluation findings are intended to be used. Let's look at some examples of how evaluation might be used by projects. In our first example, evaluation findings might highlight a particularly effective recruitment strategies for students in a cybersecurity program. The project decides to lean into this success and shift additional resources to that recruitment strategy. In a second example, the project evaluator might share that faculty in the professional development workshop had a particularly difficult time understanding a unit on semiconductors. This is a red flag that indicates that they might want to revisit that unit or provide additional instruction. Evaluation can uncover these patterns and give you an understanding of what you might change and why. The second purpose of an evaluation is for accountability. As the future funder of your project, NSF does require an independent evaluation. In order to be in compliance with the requirements of your ATE grant, you must evaluate your project. Just like you want to learn about the effectiveness of your project, so does the NSF. At a basic level, evaluation enables a high degree of accountability. Individual grantees are held accountable for their use of federal resources, and that information helps NSF be accountable to Congress and justified continued support of the program. The third purpose of evaluation is for evidence. We hear a lot about evidence-based practices or high-impact practices. We trust that systematic research and evaluation of these efforts have provided evidence that they work. Just as you borrow from others' successful interventions, one day someone else might borrow from yours. Your evaluation provides evidence of what works and what doesn't work, both equally important learning opportunities. Additionally, you will need evidence of your project outcomes if you apply for your next NSF grant in the future. When you go back to NSF in a few years to request funding for a new project, you'll have to begin your proposal with a section called Results from Prior NSF Support. This subsection has to include evidence of specific outcomes and results, including metrics to demonstrate the impact of the project activities. Again, these come from your evaluation. It's important to consider at the start of your project what kind of evidence you might want to have at the end of your project. With that in mind, I'm going to hand it over to Lissa to talk about who can serve as your evaluator. Oh, sorry. With that in mind, I'm going to hand it over to Samantha, actually.
Okay, thank you, Brianna. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll keep an eye on them, tag them as questions during it so we can make sure that we can cover as many as possible. Um, Brianna, I did have just one question unless anything else pops up. Um, the question is, how is evaluation different from just tracking progress?
That is a very good question, Samantha. And so tracking outputs is looking at things like numbers, students enrolled, or workshops held, and it's only part of the big picture. Evaluation also looks at the outcomes. And so things like whether participants gained new skills or the students were employed or whether industry partners' needs were met. So it really helps to see like more in depth about your project.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm not seeing any additional questions in the chat for right now, but I will definitely keep an eye on it. So I think we're okay to move forward.
Yeah, so before we talk about the next section, I just want to reiterate, right? Evaluation can feel like something completely foreign and confusing and stressful. And that's not how we want you to feel while going into writing your evaluation plan for your proposal. So we have a lot of information that we're going to continue to share with you today. We really hope that you take advantage of asking questions and making sure that you have a solid understanding to move forward. But I also know that you're all in the beginning stages of writing your proposal. So you may be in this point where you're like, I don't know what I don't know yet, and I don't know what questions to ask. So, hopefully, as we get into some more of this information, things will come up, or you will just tuck this information away for the future. So, all right, let's start talking about. So, who can evaluate? So, we hear this question a lot about ATE evaluations is who can evaluate my project? Well, if we look at the ATE program solicitation, which should be your starting place for all things ATE, the solicitation states that funds to support an evaluator independent of the project must be requested. Okay, but what counts as independent? Well, an independent evaluator cannot hold any other paid role on the project. For example, you can't have a co-PI or a sub-awardee who has a non-evaluation responsibilities also serve as your project's evaluator. An evaluator can be employed by a project's home institution as long as they are in a separate unit with a different reporting line than the project's home unit. Think like a different academic unit or an institutional research office. For larger institutions, this might work just fine, but for smaller institutions, it can be almost impossible. There just might not be anyone who would count as independent at those smaller institutions, but also who has the evaluation expertise and experience. So, NSF asks for evaluators to be independent in order to provide a sense of objectivity and validity to the findings. A good gut check could be, can this person evaluate my project objectively? Is there any reason that they might feel pressure to influence the results? If you're unsure about the answer to either of these questions, it's best to just go with someone outside your institution. An external evaluator, someone outside your institution and project, they just offer the highest level of independence. They can really speak honestly without worrying about potential consequences from their administrators or from yours. Sometimes it can feel difficult to find an evaluator that's right for your project. Small scale ATE projects can be particularly tricky. So, when looking for an evaluator, it's important to know that there's no specific degrees or certifications required to call yourself an evaluator. There are a lot of different types of companies and organizations that do project evaluations. Some are independent evaluation consultants, while others are large evaluation firms, sometimes based at universities or large research organizations. Here are some things you might want to look for when searching for an evaluator. You want to be careful to look for someone who has prior experience as an evaluator, someone who has strong research skills, someone who's a good communicator and who will be responsive to your situation. And it can also be helpful for someone to have an understanding of NSF or 2 year colleges. For new to ATE projects, it can be particularly helpful to have an evaluator that has prior experience evaluating an ATE project. It's not always easy to find someone with the perfect mix of credentials. But to help with this, we've pulled together a list of questions that you might want to ask an evaluator when determining who is the right fit for you. An evaluator should fit your project and your team in multiple ways. So, not only their skills in evaluation, but also their working style and how they approach the evaluation. The more you feel connected with your evaluator, the better potential for your evaluation. So now that you know who you're looking for, let's talk about how you might find them or where you'll find them. So, the first step to finding an evaluator is knowing your institutional procurement policies. So, every institution has their own rules on how and when you can work with an external contractor, including an evaluator. I wish I could give you a straightforward map of exactly what this looks like at your institution, but it is different in each state and sometimes even in each institution. So, we recommend that one of your first conversations is with someone in your procurements or contracts office. They should be able to tell you the specifics about your situation. But for right now, there are two basic paths. So, in the first path, your institution will allow you to work with an evaluator in the pre award stage, meaning right now, while you're developing your proposal. This can be a really great way to connect with your evaluator and get their insight and feedback, not only on the evaluation plan, but on your project's goals and objectives. Evaluators, we spend a lot of time thinking about what constitutes meaningful outcomes and how to measure them. So it makes evaluators a really great resource during the proposal development stage. In the second path, your institution might say that you need to wait until your project is funded in order to work with an evaluator. This means that you won't be able to have an external evaluator write your evaluation plan for your proposal. You or someone on your project team will have to write it. So while this may seem really overwhelming, know that there are a lot of other ATE projects in a similar boat and that Evaluate has a lot of resources that can support you. So, first, Evaluate's Guide to Navigating the Evaluator Procurement Process provides an overview of these possible procurement paths and suggests what you might want to ask your institutional procurement office to figure out which path you might take. If you are on that second path and you'll be writing your project's evaluation plan, you will definitely want to check out this evaluation plan checklist for ATE proposals. So, this resource lists every piece of information that you'll want to include in your evaluation plan in your proposal. And we're going to be talking more about this in the second half of today's webinar. Once you know when and how you can contact an evaluator, there are a few places you might want to look for qualified evaluators. A great place to start is the ATE Evaluator Directory. So, this is a new resource hosted by Evaluate. This directory is a collection of evaluators who have either worked with ATE projects in the past or who are interested in working with them in the future. Evaluators really took the time to highlight their qualifications, their working styles, and showcase some work examples in their directory profile. We know that the fit of an evaluator is a combination of qualifications and working style. So, in these profiles, we really try to highlight those things as well as some personal aspects of the evaluator. If you want to look more broadly, you can search the evaluator database hosted by the American Evaluation Association. So, this nationwide database is searchable by areas of expertise or geographic location. For ATE projects, we suggest using search terms such as STEM, education, community college, or NSF. If you specifically want someone local to where you are, you can search your local affiliate to the American Evaluation Association. So these are regional groups that are associated with the larger American Evaluation Association. And sometimes they actually have their own directory, which may list people who are not included in the national directory, hence why I'm listing these two separately. So while an evaluator doesn't have to be local to your area, sometimes it can just cut down on travel cost in an evaluation budget or increase the evaluator's awareness of local needs. If your institution requires, oh, something's missing with this picture here. But if your institution requires you to bid for an evaluator, we hope you consider posting your request for proposal on Evaluate's new ATE evaluation RFP repository. So, this service is a central location for ATE grant seekers to share their RFPs and for evaluators who are interested in working with ATE projects to look for them. Evaluators have signed up for notifications for new RFPs that are posted to the site. So, this is again a great way to get your RFP in front of a wide pool of qualified evaluators. So, we are going to have another question break in a few minutes. So, if anything has come up for you or if you'd like clarification about anything we've talked about so far, feel free to go ahead and write it in the chat at any time. Samantha can go ahead and tag those as questions and then she'll read them during our question break. But before that, let's talk about how much evaluation costs. So, the AT program solicitation doesn't give detailed guidance on how much evaluation should cost. The only direct reference is that you must include costs in the project budget and that the funds must match the scope of the proposed evaluative activities. So, the general guideline in the world of evaluation outside of just the NSF context is that around 10% of a project's cost should be allocated for evaluation. Again, that's evaluation in any context, not necessarily NSF or ATE, but it gives us a really good place to start. And then we can go up or down from there, depending on what kind of evaluation your project needs. So, how much would an AT evaluation cost if we calculated it at 10%? Well, let's look at this example. So if you were to ask for the maximum amount for projects funded through ATE's Track 1, so that's the small scale projects, your total project budget would be $475,000. Most academic institutions will actually apply an indirect rate to that. So all institution rates are different, but for the sake of our example, let's say your indirect rate comes out to $95,000 for the indirect, which leaves $380,000 of the budget for direct operating funds. The general guideline of 10% for evaluations is calculated based on this direct operating budget. So if you dedicate 10% of your direct costs to evaluation, that would mean that there would be $38,000 over the lifespan of the grant, which would be about $12,666 per year. So again, these funds will go towards the evaluator's time as well as their travel expenses and overhead costs. There may be other miscellaneous expenses, but these are really the main ones. So I mentioned that the cost of an evaluation can be more or less than 10% depending on the scope and type of evaluation. Some factors to consider might be whether the evaluation will use qualitative or quantitative data, use existing data or collect new data, whether the evaluation will be more or less responsive to changes in the project activities or needs, be more or less engaged and involved with project meetings. It also depends on whether the evaluation will have more or less support from the project team. So, for example, some projects have a person who serves as an internal evaluator. And this really helps to streamline data collection and analysis, making the external evaluation a little less expensive. And something else to consider is how far the evaluator might have to travel for site visits. So none of these factors are make for a better or worse evaluation than others, but the most important part about designing an evaluation is that the questions asked, the data collected, and the reports that are produced really fit the needs of the project. So we're sharing this not as a formula to write an evaluation budget, but as some guideposts to understand how that 10% rule of that 10% guideline might be affected by the type of evaluation your project is looking for. It's always best to have an open conversation with your evaluator about your needs and their needs. The fact of the matter is, if evaluation is going to bring value to your project, you have to fund it adequately. So let's pause and see what questions may have come up with you for you so far.
Okay, Lissa, I've got a good one for you. Do I have to pay my evaluator during the proposal stage?
That is a great question. Most evaluators will not ask for payment in that pre award stage when you're working with them to develop an evaluation plan. So, most evaluators or many evaluators will work without payment during that time with the assumption that they are going to be named as the evaluator if you are funded in that post award stage. But again, just make sure you're having that open, honest conversation with the evaluator. Some people will put some boundaries on the amount of time that they're available at that moment. But yes, that's a great question.
Okay. If we do use an internal evaluator, so someone from our college's institutional research team, how should that cost be reflected in the budget?
Heather, I just want to confirm that when you say an internal evaluator, this is in addition to the external evaluator and they would work together. Let me give you a second to type real fast. Not sure. Okay, let me address both situations then. So, if you decide, so again, the solicitation requires an independent evaluator. They don't use the term external, right? So, the idea is just you need someone who is not being paid for other activities on the project or who doesn't really have like a reporting line. So they are not someone's boss on your team and your team member is not their boss, right? So that you have that independence, that objectivity that that evaluator could provide. So you may end up having someone internal to your college, like someone in your institutional research office might be able to serve as your project evaluator. If that is the case, if that's the one person that's being the evaluator and that's the only role they're playing on your project, you could include them as that evaluator. And so they would be budgeted with the assumption that that 10% guideline is being followed, right? If you want more details about that in terms of like whether they're included as a contractor or a subawardee, we can go down that road as well. In the other situation where you have both an external evaluator and someone on your team who plays that role of the internal evaluator, that would just be written into their personnel line. So we see this a lot with bigger ATE projects, not entirely with smaller projects, But I do think it is important to recognize someone on your team kind of as that data point person who can really help monitor the outputs, right? So really keep track of how many activities you're doing, the students you're serving, and make that connection with someone in your IR office if you are going to gather student level data. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. All right, and that's all the questions we have for right now.
All right. Oh,
All right.
Oh,
see.
never mind.
Oh, there's one more.
Okay. Um, all right. Is their pay contingent on getting grant funds?
Right. So I wouldn't necessarily say their pay is contingent on getting grant funds. It's the fact that they do the pre-award, the proposal work without expectation of being paid, but with the agreement that if your project is funded, that they would be named as the evaluator. So to say it another way, if your proposal is funded and you receive those funds, you would hire that person as the evaluator moving forward, but they wouldn't necessarily get back pay for work that they did in the past. Okay, I'm glad it makes sense, Keith, because I questioned myself.
Right. So I think we're good with questions right now, and we can go ahead and move into the next section. All right. So in this next section of today's webinar, we'll briefly walk through the 5 essential elements of an evaluation plan for your ATE proposals to help prepare you as you begin developing your plans. Nearly all types of NSF proposals are limited to 15 pages. These little page thumbnails are images from Evaluate's most recently funded proposal. Out of these 15 pages, we dedicated 1.5 pages to evaluation. We recommend for all ATE proposals to dedicate about 1 to 2 pages for their evaluation. In these few pages, you should identify who is going to evaluate your project, identify the evaluation questions, describe how you will collect data to address those evaluation questions, and explain how you will make sense of those data throughout analysis and interpretation. Note how information from the evaluation will be communicated and how the project will use that information. And you'll also need to provide a timeline for the evaluation. For Evaluate's proposal, we included this with our project timeline as shown here. Everything we cover in this section of the webinar has been summarized in our ATE evaluation plan checklist, which should be on page 10 in your packets. And if you don't have a packet, I think there is a handout that you guys can download through Demio, or you can access it on our website. So we hope that it's a useful reference to remember what we covered today and apply these concepts in your own proposals. So I know we've covered a lot today about what evaluation is and why it matters. So now let's shift to from the why to the who. So let's look at the kind of information you should include about your evaluator in your proposal. NSF does like to see a specific evaluator named in the proposal who has committed to working on the project. If you are unable to identify your evaluator in your proposal, state why you cannot select an evaluator and your plan for finding an evaluator when the grant is funded. Then briefly describe the evaluator's qualifications and how those qualifications match with the evaluation plan for your project. For example, if you have a highly quantitative evaluation plan, the evaluator needs to show they have experience in quantitative evaluation. Then refer to the evaluator's bio, which should be uploaded with the proposal as supplementary documents. The bio should make the case that the evaluator is well matched to the project, not just that the evaluator has experience. That alignment and justification really do matter. Next, in the evaluation plan, you'll need to identify the evaluation questions. These questions serve as the foundation for your evaluation, so it's important to consider them carefully. In this section of your evaluation plan, make sure to list the key evaluation questions that the evaluation will address. These are overarching questions about the project's quality, impact, or effectiveness that the evaluation will answer based on evidence. We're talking about 3 to 7 questions, not 20 or 30. So they should be about the big picture, not about specific counts or measures. Additionally, you want to be sure to include questions about both project implementation and outcomes. And it's important that the evaluation is clearly aligned with the project's goals and activities. While this may seem pretty obvious, proposed projects activities often change and shift throughout the proposal's development process. Before submitting your final proposal, make sure to revisit your evaluation plan to confirm the evaluation has been updated to match along the way. So, what makes a good evaluation question? Evaluation questions should first of all be evaluative. I know this sounds redundant, but a non-evaluative question might ask, how many students did the project serve? This question is asking about a single data point. If the answer to that question was, for example, the project served 100 students, could we determine if that was good or bad? Not necessarily based on this question. Therefore, this question is not inherently evaluative. If we rephrase our question to ask, what was the project's impact on program enrollment, we could determine whether program enrollment increased, decreased, or remained the same since the project was implemented. This type of answer is more meaningful and more evaluative than just saying the project served 100 students. Second, good evaluation questions should be reasonable. This means that the questions are linked to what a program can practically and realistically achieve or influence. For example, asking whether the project increased hygienic welding employment in the entire state may be an unreasonable expectation of the project given time and resources. We want to avoid evaluation questions that are outside of the scope or resources of a project. Instead, we might ask, to what extent did students served by the project find employment in the hygienic sector? This question is more suitable for the expectations of the project. Third, good evaluation questions should be specific. Questions should clearly identify what will be investigated in the evaluation. For example, if an evaluation question asks, did the project increase instructor effectiveness? We are left asking what instructor effectiveness is, and how is that really defined? We don't want vague questions that are stated in overly broad terms. This introduces unnecessary confusion into an evaluation. Instead, we could be more specific and ask, to what extent did participating instructors increase their knowledge about sanitary welding techniques? This question more clearly states the project's expected outcomes. Fourth, good evaluation questions should be answerable. By this, we mean that the question should be able to be answered given accessible data and resource constraints. If we ask, for example, to what extent does the project affect long-term persistence in STEM careers, this will require long-term tracking and follow-up with students over years, potentially decades. This would not be feasible given a 3-year ATE grant. Instead, we might focus on a more short-term outcome, such as, to what extent does the project affect students' interest in pursuing a future career in STEM? It is much more feasible to answer this evaluation question within the constraints of an average ATE grant. Finally, when considering a set of evaluation questions, you want to make sure that they are complete in thoroughly addressing the purpose of the evaluation and evaluation users' information needs. All important aspects of project activities and intended outcomes should be addressed. Mapping evaluation questions to a logic model can help ensure completeness in your evaluation questions. If you're not already familiar, logic models are a way of visually communicating a project's activities and outcomes. Logic models aren't required for the ATE program, but they are a great way to show the overall design of a project and are really useful for evaluation planning. Here are a few thumbnail images of various logic models from ATE and other STEM education projects. Let's take a look at what a logic model for a proposal might look like. And just so you know, the text on this example is just a place content holder, so please don't feel like you need to read through it right away. So, a basic logic model typically has the following columns across the top. Activities, these are what a project does, creates, or delivers. Short-term, midterm, and long-term outcomes. Every logic model looks different. The point is to succinctly communicate what the project will do and what changes the project intends to bring about through those activities. Evaluation questions about activities help a project determine whether they are achieving their targets in terms of measures such as student numbers, diversity, and satisfaction. It is also important to ask questions about project strengths and weaknesses to make sure the evaluation is gathering information that can be used by the project to enhance its quality. The evaluation also should ask questions about short-term outcomes. What changes do you expect to see directly after the activities are carried out? To what extent has faculty knowledge of hygienic welding techniques changed? And then, what are the expected consequences of those changes? To what extent has student knowledge and skills changed? Asking about short-term and midterm outcomes can make a larger argument about the effectiveness of your project, rather than simply asking questions about activity counts or satisfaction. It can often be hard to capture long-term project outcomes in a meaningful way. For ATE project, these often involve students obtaining employment and colleges meeting the needs of local industries. For projects that are developing a certificate, it might take longer than the 3-year grant period for the first student to go through the program. Therefore, you might not always ask evaluation questions about long-term outcomes. As you can see, our evaluation questions span most columns of our logic model, asking questions about both implementation and outcomes. In your evaluation, you want to make the strongest argument possible about the effectiveness of your project. Consider what types of information would convince you as a scientist whether the project has been successful or not. So I know we covered this pretty fast, but again, Evaluate has a number of resources on logic models and evaluation questions to help you put this into practice. First, we have a logic model template for ATE projects on page 24 in your packet. This resource includes questions, prompts, and examples to help you develop your own logic model. We also have a webinar recording that focuses just on how to integrate a logic model into funding proposals. This recording, slides, and additional resources are available on our website. For more information about what makes a good evaluation question, see the evaluation questions checklist on page 24 in your packet, which provides more detailed definitions of the criteria for good evaluation questions that we discussed earlier. I'm going to hand it over to Samantha for a question break.
Okay, thank you, Brianna. We did have one question when you were discussing data, and just wondering if you could give like a kind of a breakdown of the difference between quantitative and qualitative data.
When I was talking about data?
Yeah, there was a section about, I think it's just the difference between the two, just like
Okay,
if you're not dealing in data every day.
Okay, so quantitative data are typically data like surveys, things around numbers, metrics, those numbers. Your qualitative data is typically comes from interviews, focus groups, open-ended questions on a survey. You may find evaluators that do either or, but a lot of evaluators typically do both quantitative and qualitative. So it depends on the needs of your project and what specifically you're looking at.
Okay, great. Thank you. I do not have anything else in messages or chat right now, but if anything is coming up for you, please go ahead and enter it. We'll give you just a second here. Otherwise, we can move on. If it pops into your mind later, you can enter it and we'll circle back.
Sounds good.
Okay, I think we're all right to move to our next section.
All right. Well, speaking about data, let's talk some more about data. So, the next element of the evaluation plan that you would want to talk about is the data for your evaluation. So, by this, we mean what information will be used and how will it be collected, analyzed, and interpreted. So, these are all distinct things, but we've grouped them together because we can't really talk about one without referencing the other. So, in this section of your evaluation plan, you need to describe what information will be used to answer the evaluation questions, how the information will be obtained and from what sources, how the quantitative or qualitative data will be summarized, and how the findings will be used to answer the evaluation questions. So, the biggest pitfall that we see in this section when describing the data that will be collected and analyzed in a project evaluation is when the connections between the project goals and the measures are unclear. So you may say that your project goals are about connecting students to local industry partners, but your evaluation plan may be asking about or collecting about something completely different rather than those connections to industry partners. So, your goals, your evaluation questions, and the data that you collect should all really be aligned. And a great way to make sure that you're doing this and that you're communicating it in an efficient way is to use an evaluation data matrix. Something that might look like this. So, here in this example, across the top, you'll see the evaluation question, which kind of overarches all the things in this table. Then you see on the leftmost column the indicators, right? So this is the information that you're going to collect that helps to answer that evaluation question. Then you see a column that identifies the data sources and the methods. So, how and where will you get that data on those indicators? Then a column on how are you going to analyze this, right? So, once you have those numbers or those stories, what are you going to do with them? And how are you going to interpret each of those, right? So, this interpretation of like, now that we have the analysis, what are we comparing it to know whether we did a good job or a bad job? Did we meet our targets? Did we do better than before? Was there growth in that pre post measure? So, as you can imagine, using this format really forces you to think carefully about the data that you'll collect, how you'll get it, and then how you're going to use it. Using a matrix format can really strengthen your evaluation plan and show those logical connections between the indicators, data sources, analysis, and interpretation. So, if you want to put your data collection plan into a table like this, Evaluate does have guidance for you in our evaluation data matrix template. So, it includes definitions and examples for each component that we just walked through. Reviewers and NSF program officers will also be looking for a description of how your project is going to communicate and use the results of your evaluation. So, in your evaluation plan, make sure to identify what evaluation reports will be prepared, and who is going to receive them. So, at minimum, you should have at least one annual evaluation report, and you should get that in advance of your annual report due date to NSF. So, this will allow you to integrate and respond to your evaluation findings in that report that you send to your NSF program officer. It's also good to mention how frequently the evaluator will communicate with the project team. And this really allows you to show that there is that real feedback loop. So you might just check in with your evaluator once a month, maybe once every 2 months. This could be via email, it could be via Zoom. I will say most likely, most of the time, we only see site visits maybe once a year if they happen in person. Also, note how evaluation results will be shared with external audiences who might also benefit from the information. Sometimes we find that projects think that these elements of an evaluation plan are assumed and that they don't need to waste space acknowledging them in their proposal. But it's important to know that we actually see these elements called out specifically in the NSF review criteria specific to ATE. So one checkpoint asks, is the evaluation likely to produce useful information to the project and others? And then another checkpoint asks, will the project evaluation inform others through communication of the results? So just to say, reviewers really will be looking for these elements in your evaluation plan. If you're not sure what communication should look like between a project team and an evaluator, the Evaluate has created a communication plan checklist to make sure that your project and evaluation teams are set up for success. We also have a checklist of ways to use your evaluation findings. So it can be really helpful to have these options in mind when you're writing your proposal. Really helps you envision how to get the most out of your evaluation. And again, both of these resources are found in your resource packet. So finally, the last element that you'll need in your evaluation plan is to convey a timeline for the evaluation activities. So you'll need to identify when key evaluation activities will take place and show that there's a concrete plan for getting timely information from the evaluation. A Gantt chart or a matrix like this is a great way to do it. By key activities, I really mean things like major data collection events, reporting, and again, when you're going to meet with your evaluator. You can include this evaluation timeline in the evaluation section, or you can also include it in the overarching project timeline like you see here. All right, so we've gone through all of the elements of information that you need to include in an evaluation plan for your ATE proposal. So here you see them all together. So identifying an evaluator, listing evaluation questions, discussing your evaluation data, how those findings will be communicated and used, and finally including a timeline of events. So, a reminder, we shared a lot of information today, but everything we talked about and more is documented in this resource packet that you've either received physically or virtually, is also available in the handouts tab of Demio. When you get to that point where you're writing your evaluation plan, there is a checklist on page 10 that will really walk you through each piece of information that you should include about evaluation in your AT proposal. We've even suggested a format for how to organize the content in your ATE proposal in this evaluation plan template guide. And of course, again, you can always reach out to evaluate with any questions you might have. So I'm going to invite Brianna to come back on stage to close us out with some next steps before our final question break, which of course we can take an extended amount of time to make sure that we're answering all of your questions.
All right. So as we wrap up today, I just want to leave you guys with some concrete next steps. So first, make sure you know your institution's requirements for procuring an evaluator. If you're able to name an evaluator in your proposal, search for evaluators with skills and experiences that fit your project's needs. And if time allows, meet with them, talk through your ideas, make sure there is real alignment around scope, expectations, and capacity before you submit. Also, consider what you want to learn about the implementation and impact of your project to inform the development of your evaluation questions. Identify the types of data that you'll need to answer your evaluation questions. And finally, consider how you will ensure your team engages with your evaluation findings to improve your project and inform reporting. A strong evaluation plan is not just about collecting data, it's about using what you learn. And as always, if you have any specific questions that come up as you're working through this, Evaluate is here to support you. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We want to pause here and open up the space for our last question and answer break. So Samantha, I'll turn it back to you to guide us through.
Okay, great. Thank you. We did have a couple questions come in about a little bit more specifics about the data portions that are going to be making up that report or the proposal. So first is, does NSF prefer evaluations that use quantitative or qualitative data, or like certain methods over other methods?
Uh, I think that's a good question. I think mainly what NSF is looking for is that it's the right fit of data collection for what the project is, the project goals. So there's no really, it's not one is better than the other. So it's not necessarily that quantitative is better than qualitative. It's more so that it fits the project goals and what you guys are, what the project is aiming to look at.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think
thank you.
often we hear people ask, what is NSF looking for? What does NSF want in these evaluations? That really differs from program to program, but within ATE, NSF has historically really valued the role that evaluation can play for learning within the project, right? So think of the first consumer of your evaluation being you and your project team, and really demonstrating that what you're learning about what's working and what's not working is helpful for you in making decisions and planning for the future.
Okay. Um, Question about logic models. Is a logic model required for ATE proposals, and who would develop it?
A logic model is not required. However, it's a good tool when thinking through your the evaluation of your project. So it's good to help plan. And these typically can be co-created with the evaluation team and the project team because it's important that everybody is on the same page. It's actually a good idea just to make sure everybody has a clear understanding of what the project is aiming to do and the different activities.
Okay, thank you. That takes care of the questions we have now, but I know that's a lot of information. Oh, we do have a couple questions coming in. All right, so we have a question from Stanley. In the proposal budget, is the evaluator cost, would it be under consulting cost?
Yes, quite frequently, that's where we see people put the cost of their evaluators under consultant. Sometimes we see people put it under a subawardee.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Yeah.
I'm
So,
gonna
any other questions about like what evaluation is, why you should do it, who should do it, why you just spent 60 minutes with us listening to things about evaluation? Really, any and all of those questions are welcome at this point.
Okay. And while you think, because we're here, we're ready to answer more questions. So while you formulate your question there, I did just want to pop the screen up for a second. We hope that you follow us on LinkedIn, check out our website. We'd be happy to connect with you. We hope that we have helpful resources that will guide you through this process, and we're always helpful. Helpful. We're always thankful when you reach out. So we're happy to help, and I hope we're always helpful too. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, feel free to reach out with questions. We would love for you to complete our feedback survey because guess what? We love data. We like to know how we did, and we do use it to shape our future resources, webinars. So it really is helpful and means a lot to us. So if you have time, we'd love for you to click on that and fill out a short survey about today's webinar.
Thank you all. Thank you again, Mentor Connect, for asking us to do this. And we look forward to seeing a lot of you at High Tech in the summer.
Thank you.